Unspoken issues.
Surrounded on all sides. The odds of survival are 1,000,000 to 1.
And with the collapse of the former superpower,
several powerful factions now vie for control.
the threat is real. An evil organization calling itself Scar.
Known only as Scar.
Their goal, nothing short of total world domination. Led by this man, known only as Iron Claw. We will be victorious! Not on my watch!
Situation critical.
Roll call!
Ballistic. Harpoon. Mayday. Black Dragon.
Sergeant Damage!
Quick sight. Metalhead.
Right, Lieutenant Stone!
The odds are 1,000,000 to 1.
And that's the way we like it!
G.I. Joe Extreme. Oh my goodness. We are here to discuss G.I. Joe Extreme today. And we're not getting into the cartoon. We'll be talking a little bit about that, I'm sure. We're not going to be reviewing the cartoon, which, from what I understand, ran for 2 seasons, amazingly. We are going to be talking about the comics. And we're going to be talking about 2 sets of comics this evening, as a matter of fact. One was the original series, 1 through 4. It came out from Dark Horse in 1995. And then the second set of issues that we're going to be discussing, that dropped in 96, if I remember correctly. Volume 2.
Yeah, 95 and 96 are right for the mini and then the ongoing.
Dean and Darry sitting over here like, is he going to introduce me before I speak? No, he's not. Not yet. But thank goodness they swooped in for the save. I appreciate that. Here it is, guys. G.I. Joe Extreme, which, by the way, this isn't airing today, but we are recording this on G.I. Joe Day, correct?
It's true. It's G.I. Joe Day. They dropped a lot of really cool classifieds. That new scrap iron is fucking boss.
Yeah.
You talk about a way, you got to give them credit there. That encapsulates everything that's cool about the original one while updating it, losing nothing. And that can be a tough thing to pull off. But yeah, it's G.I. Joe Day. I guess because Hasbro said, I don't really exactly know why. But we got a lot of Snow Job, Televiper, right. The Trouble Bubble, the Steel Brigade, male and female Steel Brigade. How about that? It's really good stuff. So yeah. So yeah, G.I. Joe Day, and thankfully not a goddamn thing mentioned about G.I. Joe Extreme.
We've been wanting to record this episode for quite a while. I remember actually looking at my notes. Last time I accessed this shit was 9 months ago. That's when this was originally proposed. So we finally got together to talk about these issues. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know we'll at least have some fun. It wasn't fun reading it. Let's just, I can say that. The discussion will be fun. We'll say that.
Fair enough.
Let's just kind of cover some ground, so where we're all coming from when it comes to G.I. Joe. All right, I'll start because as a kid, I cannot remember what my first G.I. Joe was that my mom got me, but whatever it was started a love for that franchise to where I can remember getting a lot of the later G.I. Joes. When I say later G.I. Joes, I mean I wasn't on the ground floor with like the original 82, 83 set.
82 and 83, yeah.
Okay. So I wasn't there. I think about 85, 86 is when I really started wanting my mom to pick these things up so I could play some of them.
Bazooka, Lady J, Storm Shadow, Snake Eyes with Timber era.
Right. So I'm
and a lot of people think 85 and 86 are the best years G.I. Joe toy-wise of all time.
At about that point, I started, I watching the show and wanting these figures to a point where I think when it was all said and done, I probably had about 30 or 40 G.I. Joes at the most at one time. And then, but I always had a friend, 2 friends, as a matter of fact, that had like their parents would buy them anything and everything that they wanted when it comes to G.I. Joe. To this day, I believe I know where a USS flag is sitting in my friend's basement.
Very nice.
Are you suggesting that we do a heist?
I've already thought about it.
Is it Starchers 3?
It's so funny. I may have told you guys this before. I don't know. But at one point, it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I get a hold of my friend and I'm like, dude, you can still have the G.I. Joes. I mean, of course, I'm like, if you still got them, what are they doing? You ain't doing anything with them. You're over in Chicago. They're sitting here in Marietta. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I still have them. I said, are you interested in selling? Because he had a ton. So he asks his fucking mom, and his mom says no.
What?
35 years old. Motherfucker couldn't sell his G.I. Joes because his mom didn't want him to. So his mom is either a serious collector and probably knows her shits, which I don't think so. Or B, she's just like, no, I bought these. You know, I want them here. They remind me of you. Anyway. So, yeah.
This is like the opposite of the story you usually hear where it's like, I had 37 amazing fantasy 15s and 14 1952 Mickey Mantle rookie cards and 37 Storm Shadows men on the minute package and 2 USS Vikings. I threw them all out the second I left for college. Like,
Right.
It's like the opposite. Like, what the fuck's going on?
Now, that did happen to me. My mom got rid of my G.I. Joes and gave them to some kid that she knew. Yeah, so I lost a bunch. I ended up accumulating some more. And then I had the auction find of the century at one point for me. Anyway, when it came to G.I. Joes. You don't usually find them. I mean, you can find some, but the amount of figures that I found for the price that I got, I was like, man, this is great. But Dean, you may have seen me at one point. I was changing the rubber bands on this
surgery.
Yeah, buddy. So I was posted a bunch of those, and my Sergeant Slaughter, my fucking Sergeant Slaughter is the only one where the screw stripped in the back, and I could not change that O-ring. I could not, and I'm sure there's probably something I could do to get that screw out of there, but I was done.
Do you know which Sergeant was?
Was one a mail in or?
Yeah, does he say USA on his front? Or, okay, so
No.
I think. I can't remember which is which, but like one of them was the mail-in and one of them came with the triple T. And then later there'd be another Sergeant Slaughter in the 89 that came with the armadillo, I want to say.
Well, anyway.
And they did a big LJN style Sergeant Slaughter because like the WWF, the LJN couldn't, they didn't own the rights to Sergeant Slaughter. So Hasbro did. That was a mail-in, and that's a very rare
wow.
figure too.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know a lot of useful stuff about G.I. Joe.
That's all right. That's all right. So to kind of wrap this up for myself personally, probably about, I know I was 14 years old. I'm pretty sure I was driving. I was 16. Hearts was the name of a department store down here in Marietta, was closing. They were like just shelves full of G.I. Joe. Now, mind you, I'm 16. So that's like, I want to say it was 95, 96.
And that line finishes in 94.
Was it? They were littering the shelves. The ones with the backpacks that had all the little beakers, buttons you could push where they would say things. Those were all over the
Sonic
shelf.
Fighters and talking. There was the talking guys and Sonic Fighters. They're not the same, but they have the same big backpack with the noisemakers.
Okay, so
but, yeah, you could get like Commander Hawk, who's like, "Let's go."
And what were
he's
those
got the glasses and like the looks like he works at. He's got the general hat that looks like he's like works at an ice cream place in the 50s.
Yes, dude. I think I have that sitting upstairs.
Yeah. That was the talking General Hawk.
Was there a space brigade of some sort?
Yeah, Star Brigade is what they were called. And even before Star Brigade, there was the Defiant, the Crusader, Astro Viper. I think Payload, Countdown came out before Star Brigade, although he was just a figure of himself. It's funny, the Defiant was a space shuttle, and then somebody drove the thing to launch the space shuttle. Might it be Hardtop? I can't remember off the top of my head. But so Star Brigade, and then they brought in like the Mega Marines, and they fought the big monster guys.
Now, see, that I didn't see any of those.
Good. You didn't deserve to. No, I'm just kidding. Very, very, it's cool that you saw like the Star Brigade guys. The Mega Marines are like those are hard to find. Like, and when you see one, they don't look like a G.I. Joe thing. It's like a fucking, you remember those lizard guys in the X-Men arcade games that were like so frustrating? They'd like jump and tail swipe you before you could do anything. A couple of the bad guys there look like that. I can't remember their names. Their names are like Monstrox or some bullshit. There's a Monstro Viper too, but yeah, you had a gold mine at Hearts, bro.
Oh, I know, man. Well, I was like, they were marked way down. So I got a bunch of them. And I still have some of the figures sitting upstairs, but anyway,
that's amazing. Some of those, like at the end of the line, like the Mega Marines, and some of those, like they get a little pricey because like they didn't make many of them. It's funny, they were going. You can look at plans for '95. They were going to kind of retool. They're finally going to release another Baroness. There's a Dr. Mind. You can see like the schematics, but they're like, no, we're gonna go in a different direction. Not GI Joe Extreme yet, oddly enough. But yeah, there's a little in between. There's a bridge.
I get you, Darry. Give us the GI Joe history for you.
I did not get in on the ground floor, considering I was a baby. But the first one I remember getting was Knockdown, which the internet tells me was 1987, part of the Battle Force 2000. I was hooked. I love G.I. Joe. I love the cartoon. I love the toys. I love the comics by the great Larry Hama. As Dean would say, I'm a total G.I. Joe Real American Hero mark. To this day, when I see a good one, I still pick it up. My largest obsession with them comes from the fact that they would cross over with the Transformers so often. So even when they weren't a popular brand, I was always like, well, listen, the Joes killed Bumblebee that one time, and who hasn't wanted to do that? So
that's right. Goldbug. Hello.
Yes,
G.I.
sir,
Joe
yes,
versus
sir.
the Transformers 1 through 4. Was that 87?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that's because they still had the Marvel license. It was still the shooter era. So yeah, I think 87 sounds about right. But yeah, I love G.I. Joe. I think it's aged incredibly well. I love the original stories. My one complaint, and I know we were all talking about this offline, is these are all Hasbro properties. And while Transformers the movie is one of the greatest things ever crafted by human hands, G.I. Joe the movie is a complete letdown. Like the opening intro, I think the line you shared with us, Jesse, is this is the greatest thing ever animated. And I agree, because it's the Joes defending the Statue of Liberty from Cobra. But the rest of the movie is about Snake Men and the ending.
Destroying the Cobra helicarrier.
Yeah. It's great and terrible at the same time. But I always look back at that movie like, oh, what a wasted opportunity.
So much, yeah.
But,
There's only really all the Cobra Law shit. The only cool thing out of it, honestly, I guess two things. The army builders have cool helmets, those insect-looking helmets, they're fine. But Nemesis in Force is badass.
Oh my gosh.
He looks cool, the big wings and all that, and the fucking elbow knives or what the fuck ever. That dude rules. Everything else is a waste of my fucking time.
Was he voiced by Peter Cullen, or was that Globulus? I don't remember. I know
Globulus was Burgess Meredith, I want to say.
Okay, the Nemesis Enforcer was voiced by the same guy.
But I can't say. Don't take my word on that. I know more about the voice cast of Transformers the movie because I genuinely think it's a good movie. Movie may be a strong word for what it is, but it's an enjoyable thing to watch.
It's a 90-minute.
It's 2,000 miles an hour, but G.I. Joe the movie, it doesn't come together and
no.
It's funny too because in Transformers the movie, as much as you hated seeing Optimus die and everything, some of the new guys were cool. I liked Wheelie. I liked Cub. I liked Galvatron a lot. I'm a huge Galvatron guy to this day. The new guys in G.I. Joe, the movie, in the comics and their toys, they rule. Falcon, Law and Order, Jinx, Tunnel Rat. On the movie, they're just they don't get them over the way that Transformers got over a few of the new guys. RC, another one from Transformers the movie that you just absolutely love from that point on. Yeah. I'm sorry, nobody cared about Big Lob. They just didn't. And that's sad. They should have, because he could make a basket with a grenade, and I respect that.
Jinx was a great character. I remember seeing that movie for the first.
And a great toy.
Yeah, she was great.
Nobody, when it comes to you talk about the ninja fad of the '80s. I know we're way off the rails, but I can't help it.
No, this needed to happen tonight.
Nobody got more out of less in the '80s proper than G.I. Joe. There's a strong argument that the coolest looking G.I. Joe is Storm Shadow, one of the simplest designs you can think of. Okay, Jinx, cool as fuck looking. It's she wearing red slippers and red ninja pajamas, but it works. Firefly, before he's a ninja, he's just wearing this little camo thing. You can see his eyes. Cobra insignia on the arm. Couldn't be much fucking cooler. They were really, really good at not just more is more, but with their ninja guys and their stealth guys, less became a lot more for them. In a way that in the 80s where ninjas were so ubiquitous, theirs really stood out. That's saying a lot. Yet everything from American Ninja to Chuck Norris Karate Commandos waiting for you.
You guys talk about the movie, and I can remember the Christmas. It was either my grandma got it or my dad got it for me. I know I was over at my grandma's when I opened up the 3-pack of Globulus, Nemesis Enforcer, and the Royal Guard.
I got the other 3-pack.
And
Slaughter's Renegades, Taurus, Red Dog, and Mercer. And the only one of those guys who has mattered since is Mercer. He's the only one they've really kept around and done anything with.
87.
Yeah, I remember seeing them side by side. I had to pick one or the other. I got psyched out the same day.
Was there never a Pythona figure?
There was later on with the Collector Corps. There also wasn't a Big Lob back in the day. They didn't make a Big Lob, but they didn't make a Pythona. I presume for racist and sexist reasons.
I gotta say, they never gave me an RC figure until like way later than you'd think. There was not one release in the original 80s lineup, and that was unfortunate. I have one now. I'm very proud to own it, but back in the day they didn't give us that stuff.
Think about like the G.I. Joe women. The only one in the original 82 to 94 Real American Hero line, the only one who gets like, there's a million updates of like 47 Snake Eyes, like 12 Hawks. There's only like one extra Scarlet. There's only one Baroness. There's one Cover Girl. Yeah. There's one Serana. I mean, there's one Jinx. I mean, there may be a mail order color palette swap that I'm not thinking of, but as far as like a retooling, they made a new Crimson Guard. They made 2 bats, and I love the bats, but like, you don't think we wanted a new Baroness? It just shows you, there was, and I don't know if there still is or not, but like this ties into like why Young Justice got canceled from Cartoon Network. There's this weird belief that boys won't play with girls' action figures and that girls won't buy toys, despite the fact that there's a tremendously large amount of economic and sociological research that shows these things just aren't true. But believe it or not, you can't tell a motherfucker in a suit in a high-rise office anything. They got it all figured out.
I can tell you, I have spent more money on Baroness action figures than I'm comfortable admitting.
I have so much Baroness stuff. I mean,
oh my goodness,
she was honestly probably my first crush as far as like my GI. Talk about my GI Joe history. I remember being like, Baroness might not be too bad if she captured you.
Yeah, buddy. And
I had a crush on Cover Girl too. I didn't really care for Scarlet a lot. Scarlet, Lady J were always talked about a ton. Amongst the GI Joe fellas. The second graders. I was into Cover Girl and the Baroness. Okay. Minor league hots for Zorana. You got to have a little something for Zorana.
Did she have pink hair, right?
Yeah. Okay. And remember, her rifle was like a weed eater at the end of a gun. Like, oh man,
she is from Florida. I mean,
she's from Australia, like the rest of the Dreadnoughts.
Oh, she's from Australia. That's right.
Yeah. I think Zartan, because she's Zartan's sister. They're from Australia. I think a couple of them aren't. Like Buzzer's not. I think Buzzer's actually from England, and he is a sociologist. He's like, I'm going to go study outlaw biker gangs and see how this works. Turns out it works very well for Buzzer. See, this is what I'm talking about. I've almost memorized all the fucking file cards. I can think about this. I wish I had more room. I would just buy all these G.I. Joes. And, maybe I will. Maybe I'll just say, fuck it. And just like, I'll rent a room at Jesse's and start just like storing my stuff there.
Sounds like a plan.
$12 a month, sir. And you can play with the G.I. Joes 2 hours a week.
Oh, I'd love to do that. That is, man. That is. As far as toy franchises go for me, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is probably the top, and then G.I. Joe is right underneath that for me. I know your guys' love for Transformers. So this is a franchise I loved. G.I. Joe Extreme, guys, I didn't know about it until you told me we were going to be talking about it. That's how under the radar that shit was. Of course, at that point, I'm 95. I'm getting ready to graduate the next year, and then I'm going to college, and I'm kind of getting out of that. I still have my love for the Real American Hero, but I mean, sure. I'm also not within access of watching television. Was this on Fox? Any idea what station?
I believe it was on Fox Saturday mornings. Okay. I think it came on at like 10 Central, maybe, because it was before X-Men. I know that.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I was not watching this, so I had no idea it even existed. So we got to talk about. Okay,
that's the only time. That's the only reason I know of. I like saw it was because it came on before X-Men. The only time I ever watched it was like accidentally. I remember seeing like half an episode and being like, "Not for me." What the fuck? I was old already. This? I was like, "This ain't my G.I. Joe."
That's the best.
Where's Dial Tone? Where's Captain Gridiron?
That's the best way to describe it. I think I only ever saw G.I. Joe Extreme by accident. Like you turn the TV on, you're waiting for something else, you're expecting something else, and this guy is screaming at you, and the guy who's not
Extreme.
he's and it was, and I couldn't tell one episode apart from the other. They all seem to be the same. They all have the same like weird janky animation. I didn't have any of the toy for those of you who don't know, this was released around the same time as Transformers Beast Wars. So whenever I was able to convince my parents to go to a toy store, it was like, I need that rhinoceros that turns into a robot that also turns into a tank. No, I don't care that I already have one. I need another one. I broke it. So I had none of the G.I. Joe.
Man, you can't be spending time on G.I. Joe Extreme. The Ghost Rider Toy Biz was out at this time. Come on.
Oh, I love those. I love
back.
Ghost Rider so much.
Keep
Those
talking,
things
I'll be
glowed
right back.
in the dark. Oh.
Yeah. Glow to the dark. But if you went to the toy store, bro, like these didn't look good. I've seen them in person. They don't look good. Their scale isn't great.
Yeah.
The accessories don't quite fit. Do you remember DC's Total Justice toy line?
Yeah.
That's like, to me, these are very similar, except that has some charm and this has no charm.
Well, that was a good line because I feel like Total Justice was like the first time I ever got a Kyle Rayner Green Lantern.
Right.
Or
No,
like,
well, I mean, again, I think if you look at the molds and you look at some of the like accessories, it's very similar, but you can feel Total Justice in a way you just don't feel G.I. Joe Extreme.
it's all Kenner. I mean, just looking from like the toy point of view, I mean, this is around the time that Hasbro absorbs Kenner. Their heyday with the Star Wars stuff is 5-10 years removed at that point. And,
at least.
Yeah, and you can tell they're running on fumes. I mean, even when they do take over, G.I. Joe Extreme only lasts for a single wave of figures. That's a failure any way you cut it. At least, Beast Wars went on for 4 years before the new series launched. So, I mean, I really think
even Transformers Generation 2 got like 3 waves, I want to say.
Yeah, and even those that were older ones that were just recolored in bright freaking neon, they still got released. Yeah.
I think some of the same, as weird as this is going to sound, because on some level, G.I. Joe Extreme's a lot different from a real American hero. But on some levels, it's not, and that's part of the problem. But the same thing I think the same issue with Transformers Generation 2 and why it didn't take off versus why Beast Wars took off. Because, like, what is this? It's just kind of the same. You put a different shine on it. You kind of, you moved the lights around. You moved it from one shelf to another. But it's not that. It's not so different that anybody would care, and it's not so far apart. Like, again, G.I. Joe will make a really nice comeback in like 98 and 99 in Toys R Us, and then Devil's Due will start publishing comics in like 2000, and Gadzooks, the G.I. Joe and Transformer shirts are going to dominate the years 99 to 2001 is like a cool thing that you could get if you were a cool rave going, kid like me, real cool. When you weren't wearing like one of those shiny Chris Jericho shirts, you would wear one of these like G.I. Joe shirts, because it showed everybody that you had, cultural capital, if you will.
That's right.
That's really, really well said, because I think you're absolutely right. It goes back to the character of Black Dragon, right?
Right.
He's a ninja, but he's not Snake Eyes, who you already love, but he's not different enough that you don't look at him and just think, wait, why isn't Snake Eyes in the show? I really like Snake Eyes.
Why isn't Lieutenant Stone Duke?
Yeah, exactly.
Why
You're right.
isn't Mayday Scarlet?
Yeah.
Why isn't Freight Roadblock?
Yeah.
There's just, whatever. Yeah. And when you read these comics, there's no reason to feel any different because, man, I have never read such fucking insipid dialogue in my life.
Do you like Barr?
Guys are just, Mike W. Barr's a weirdo, man, for me, because, like, he's written some stuff I've really liked, like, the original Outsiders run, Mantra, I think Batman year 2. And so I really like that stuff. He's also written like Outsiders Volume 2, which is like fucking the wettest, hottest garbage this side of New Jersey. And he's written this for people. It's like people are talking, but it's almost like he invented a chat bot at the time to approximate conversation. They're just like saying things. There's no conversation. They're just words back and forth. So, but yeah, I think that's part of the problem here is you read these comics, you look at the toys, you watch the cartoon. What's the fucking difference? What have we done other than swap some names? And we gave them some cable guns and we gave them some,
Shoulder pads.
Strong guy, big old, muscles, and that's it. Yeah, like shoulder pads. Who cares? We took the new logo and we went back to the old logo. We turned it diagonal and wrote Extreme under it.
Right underneath it. Look out.
Look out. It feels like a waste of everyone's time. And in some ways, if I don't know the entire history of it, but if this was a thing that was given to Kenner to prove that they belonged, it almost seems like they were set up to fail. This is like asking someone to, I don't know, bail out the sinking Titanic with like 2 pails and a paper cup. Like, listen, just do it. Just do it. I don't know how this was ever going to pay off at the time. And this is in an era when we liked extreme stuff, like Extreme Championship Wrestling. The X Games are going to be good. This just, this didn't
90s makeover. That's what happened. Somebody went into a boardroom and said, we got to give these guys a 90s makeover. And they went with that and did not execute it probably as well as they should have.
I don't know that it could have been executed. I think the best thing, honestly, that they could have done with the G.I. Joe license and the Transformers license, for that matter, for Generation 2, which I actually like. I like a lot of those toys. I like the comic book. They should have just let it be gone. Sometimes you planted a field too much, and you've got to just burn it, and you've got to wait a little bit, and then the grass will grow again, and the birds will come again, and we'll deal with it. Because what winds up kicking these things off? In the Transformers case, it's Beast Wars, which is almost completely different, and G.I. Joe 1998, Back to Basics. They released like sets at Toys R Us. Here's the original guys. Here's like a set of like urban Cobra Warriors and stuff, and then that balloon. Yeah, they should have just waited. They should have waited in both cases. Beast Wars was different, but also still close enough to where, like, if they had just waited to come out with Beast Wars, I think it would have been even bigger.
I brought down Iron Claw. I think you guys may have seen.
Oh, there's right.
Yeah,
probably the best looking guy out of all of them. Honestly,
agreed.
he's got a striking look. Like he looks like him and M. Bison like don't like each other and their dictatorships border each other.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Hey, Street Fighter was incorporated in the G.I. Joe Real American Hero. Don't forget.
I do remember that. Do
you remember the commercial with Duke being like, "What's a Dawson?" And then like Dawson like kicks him in the face. He's like, "Oh!"
It's the most lethal G.I. Joe team yet. Capcom Street Fighter 2. No way! Wait. There's Guile, Ryu, Zangief, Blanca, and Dalcine. What's a Dawson? Oh. Some with real ninja moves.
Hey! But Cobra's got Street Fighters too!
Vega, Sagat, Balrog.
And me and my son!
They look unbeatable! Ah! You know them, you love them. So correcto! Capcom Street Fighter 2 figures each sold separately. Oh, I like them.
Those live-action early 90s G.I. Joe commercials, I would watch a movie with those
just
effects.
Nothing but those?
I really would. I thought that it looked fake, but in a good way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, see, I got, is it Sagat? He's the taller one. I know Dalcine.
Yeah, he's fucking tiger uppercut.
Right. And when they made those, I mean, it's like they had to make specific molds for these guys to be a little bit taller than the rest of them. And I loved that.
Fatter.
Yeah, dude, I loved it. I have Sagat up there. I have Balrog. And I'm pretty certain I lost his fucking boxing gloves. But either way, yeah, now see that is a crazy figure. I mean, you got to think about that. That's compared to the rest of the Joes who are regularly humanoid in some way. This thing is like, Blanca is out there.
Like we were talking about Mega Marines and stuff. Also, they did Mortal Kombat figures in the same form factor, but like Street Fighter said G.I. Joe on them. The Mortal Kombat guys didn't. But for me, they're part of G.I. Joe. Let's not fuck around.
I agree.
Stop messing around. Because who doesn't want to see Kung Lao versus Storm Shadow?
Sign me up.
I'm in.
All right. So There it is. That is our history. That is what we're trying to tell you. What came before G.I. Joe Extreme? You're already getting a taste of our feelings of G.I. Joe Extreme. Now we're going to hop into these comics.
And I'll be the first to admit to it. I think y'all two would as well. My feelings for Real American Hero greatly color my ability to like this stuff.
Yeah.
Same.
And
there's other G.I. Joe that comes along later. Like I like the Classified line. I like G.I. Joe Resolute. I like G.I. Joe Valor versus Venom. But like this was too soon and too different and too like you said, too 90s makeover pandering. And this is coming from a guy who loves Cable talking to a guy who loves Cyberforce. So, if this is too extreme 90s for us, I mean, this man likes Cyblade. He likes Impact, Heatwave. He can't handle Quick Strike. And that's too much.
Oh, Impact.
Black Anvil.
That's right. All right, so December of 95 is our cover date here for our first volume of G.I. Joe Extreme. Just to break down the creative team here, here's how we're going to do it. I want to rush through the first story, which is, I'm going to call it the Iron Claw Saga. There are 4 stories here: the Ire of the Iron Claw, Pawn of the Iron Claw, the Gang's All Here, and then the Ultimate Price. So that's going to be our first synopsis. Second story that takes place in these books, and that is a story called From the Ashes. From the Ashes, Few Are Chosen, Rebirth, and Baptism of Fire. Now, From the Ashes and the Iron Claw Saga are all written by Mike W. Barr. Hour of the Iron Claw, penciled by Tatsuya Ishida, inked by Scott Reed and Tatsuya Ishida as well. And then From the Ashes, we have, like I said, written by Mike Barr, story by Mike Richardson, art by Jerry Bingham, and colored by David Nestel. So we got to intro our characters. And I'm going to try my best to get through these. We got a lot of characters to kind of go through because the synopsis is very light, but our characters are really what you've probably come to the dance for. It's G.I. Joe. Each character, they're going to be standout. They're going to have their own personality, right? Well, okay, let's find out here. So what is G.I. Joe?
Only one personality here, Jesse. Extreme!
It's extreme! What is G.I. Joe? So I've got it broke down here who these people are. There's mention of, and you guys help me out here, Inter-Alliance.
Seems like it's like the United Nations. This is released in 95, 94, 95, 96. And like it takes place in 2009 though. And so somewhere along the way, apparently there's been like some kind of getting together with these nations. And so they're working together. It seems like seems like the United Nations has gotten some teeth and can actually do something.
Okay. All right. So that's kind of a background thing, not a major thing here. It's brought up throughout the issues a few times.
But it's also important to remember too, none of them work for the U.S. government. I feel like that was the point of the Inter-Alliance. Like I agree with Dean. I think it's supposed to be the United Nations, but it functions in the same way. Like this G.I. Joe team is much smaller, but they're still well financed. They have like an island, they have whatever tech you need, all the cool toys. But it just seemed like a weird thing. Like by the time we got to 1995 and the Cold War is over, the 90s, we don't want to deal with the government. We're going to make this other thing that's vaguely international, and we're going to have them report to that. So I thought that was interesting too, because I feel like the original one was very much like, G.I. Joe, Real American Hero is a strike force that is part of the U.S. military. So I thought that was an interesting change in the narrative, because again, we were talking about this, like you changed it, but you didn't change it enough. That would have been interesting to push in one direction. It's like, well, you're all U.S. soldiers and you all have like questionable backstories, especially if you look back to the Sergeant Savage stuff. It's like, well, now you're reporting directly to the UN and going into like, Kosovo or whatever this made up country is supposed to be. So again, like, I wish they had pushed that a little bit more, as opposed to just saying, okay, it's basically G.I. Joe, but they report to the Inter-Alliance instead of the Jugglers or whatever.
Okay.
That's kind of, it's cool that you mentioned that, because G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero, like is marketed as like G.I. Joe International Heroes abroad, and then that's part of the reason why Hasbro acquired Action Force. It comes out about the same time, but Action Force exists as its own action figure line before Hasbro buys it, and then they brand G.I. Joe as Action Force in the UK and Europe. Before it all congealed or whatever, guys have like different origins for different things, like scrap irons from like Peru in Action Force for a while, and like Major Ironblood is Cobra Commander but isn't, and like there's also like I want to say some I know Flint's the leader, but I don't know if they make him from like England, but some other guys are like from Europe who we know are not, like, you know, so that's just or they're from international locales that like here they were all from wherever. Also, I don't Scrap Iron doesn't strike me as Peruvian.
No, me either. Next up is Mr. Clancy. He is the head, at least the guy who's pointing the spear of G.I. Joe where it needs to go. Then we have Lieutenant Stone, who is the fearless leader of the group. And as a matter of fact, if I could find the file card here, I'll read it. G.I. Joe team leader and military hero, master of tactical battle skills, uses extreme intelligence and marine training to lead the most challenging and dangerous missions. Straight off the dog tag. And then, who do we have next? We've got Black Dragon. All right, Black Dragon, the ultimate ninja warrior and stealth missions expert. Now, he works best at night using a sharpened sixth sense to track the enemy. Rarely speaks. When he does, people listen.
He talks all the time.
I was going to say, what the fuck? He is... Okay. Oh, by the way, yeah. Okay.
Honestly, that was a good call. It's the one thing they did right is like, if you want me to think less of Black Dragon as Snake Eyes Light, yeah, have this guy jabber a lot.
Right. Next up, we've got Mayday. Now, I don't think Mayday has a figure in this first line. I'm going off of yojo.com, believe it or not.
I can't believe that they skipped the lady action figure.
My notes are feisty redhead who doesn't take any guff from her peers.
Yeah, that doesn't sound familiar at all. It honestly would have been better if they just created all new archetypes. They're just taking this.
I know, dude. Let's give this person a different name. Oh, you fooled me. I had no idea.
It might have been better if they just called it like, you know, military extreme or some other thing, you know, because you're asking me to compare this stuff in a weird way. It's like New Coke and Coke Classic, buddy. You already had this one right.
Metalhead. So Metalhead, he's a tech surfer dude. It's probably the best way to put it, but computer communications genius and electronic warfare whiz, blasts rock and roll music in the heat of battle, gets the job done with an in-your-face attitude and cranked up tunes. The louder, the better.
If it's too loud, you're too old. And this is one of the reused code names because Metalhead was the name of an anti-tank Iron Grenadier guy.
That's right.
From Real American Hero. One of the least offensive of all the characters that they create, honestly. Like, he's probably one of the ones I'm like, wow, this is almost a character.
Speaking of Quick Strike. Once a member of SCAR with his brother, who he believes to be dead, and I believe he's possibly from Jamaica. There's a lot of inflection on some accents here in the dialogue. I'll just put it that way. Harpoon is an aquatic operations coordinator, former Navy SEAL who really makes waves when battles take to the sea, though he'd rather be fishing than fighting.
Good to see you, Torpedo. Go on.
Ballistic is a pinpoint sharpshooter, uses incredibly honed visual skills to target in on the enemy in unbelievable feats of marksmanship. Stays ultra cool, never missing a shot when the pressure builds. Ballistic. All right. Sergeant Savage. So I'm going to read the dog tag here. And you guys seem to know there seems to be a little bit of history about this character. Yeah. And I want you guys to tell me about it.
I will.
Okay.
Happily.
Sergeant Savage, artillery and ammo specialist, survived cryogenic freezing by enemies in World War II. Woke 50 years later as a military hero, totally into new firepower systems, has a serious thing for grenades. All right, Dean, you have the floor. You have the floor, sir.
So basically, for like the 20 minutes between G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, and G.I. Joe Extreme, G.I. Joe did sort of a soft reboot, and they introduced Sergeant Savage, and I keep wanting to say it is Leatherneck Raiders, but that's not it. That's Captain Savage. It's a Marvel comic. His Screaming something, right?
Eagles.
Screaming Eagles. That's right. Screaming
Oh.
Eagles. And like basically it's a Captain America ripoff. They got Joe Kubert to come in here and draw some great stuff, some really good art. They put out like a 30-minute straight to VHS like cartoon that basically said that like, you're out of here, Cobra. G.I. Joe, and like he's the new hope for G.I. Joe, and it wasn't great either, but like there were some cool toys that were based, because like he gets like, you know, like the old time like plane from, I forget, I think it's a P-38, but I'm not sure. I'm not an aviation guy, but like a type of plane from World War II and like a Jeep, and they did this for like the 20 minutes between, and it didn't work because why would it? It's like a Captain America ripoff, and again,
Right.
they weren't getting too far enough away from G.I. Joe. But it's interesting that like this character is carried over from that soft reboot to this all the way reboot with a very, very similar origin. I remember when I first heard about Sergeant Savage, I read about it in Hero Illustrated in their toy section. They were like, G.I. Joe, no more. They're like, you're going to replace it with this. And like, I was uproarious. I was like, what?
I could imagine,
Why?
man.
And they were even like, they're going to replace it with this Captain America ripoff thing. And like I said, it didn't work. It's interesting they had enough faith in the Sergeant Savage character to bring him over. I like him better in G.I. Joe Extreme than I do as his own thing. I think it's more interesting to see him as a guy who's like, think about, if you're going to rip off Captain America, you need to do it in a different way. And it's different in Extreme, where he's like, I love these new weapons. Hand me that laser photon helmet, you know? Because Captain America's like, I got to catch up. I'm a man at a time. He's like, Sergeant Savage, I've been blowing shit up a long time. You know, hand me the weapon and point it in the direction you wanted fired. So, I mean, I appreciate that they tried a little something different. And that is a very small tidbit, a small aspect of G.I. Joe history that really gets overlooked. I think a lot of people think that it goes straight from Real American Hero to G.I. Joe Extreme, and it's not quite the case. I don't know, Darry, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the Screaming Eagles one shot is really weird because it introduces a lot of the same character types. So
right. But aren't they called like Blitz or something?
Something like that. Yeah, they all have different names, but
right.
You know, there's and again, this wasn't unique to them. I feel like every show that came out at this time had the same smart guy, tough guy, wild card. You know, it's your classic archetypes. Yeah, but you know, we said this earlier, but it's not like they really reinvented it. It was almost like they were concentrating on other stuff, and they had a couple hours at the end of the day, and they were like, well, we already got this pilot, so why don't we just rejigger this a little bit. We'll move the setting up to 2009 because that seems just far enough in the future we can get away with not having to explain anything, and we'll see what happens. But it's it's this weird, it's not even a reboot. It's almost like those stories must have happened because in the Sergeant Savage, it's very strange. It's definitely a continuation of G.I. Joe. General Hawk and Lady J are both in it, and the Joe Force is mentioned. This is supposed to be like a new, harder edged version of the team. So, but here nothing is mentioned. And in fact, in the comics, they seem to reference a brand new G.I. Joe who was active at decades in the past, who's not Joe Colton.
I don't even want to get started on that weird ass unknown soldier ripoff story. I think, and this may be a hot take, what would have worked better if they were going to reboot G.I. Joe is do the Sergeant Savage thing, but just have him come lead the Joes.
Right.
Like, instead of just like, writing off all the Joes and changing everything, just be like, oh, Sergeant Savage is here, and now he's teamed up with, Sci-Fi and Wetsuit and, an Alpine, and we're, rock and roll, and we're doing things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it wasn't enough of a change to make a difference. So why not just bring that in and see if that's the jolt it needs a little, but again, I don't know. I don't know why the decisions were made, because again, they had stuff like, oh, we're going to do Battle Corps next. And then they didn't, and they did Sergeant Savage, and then quickly pivoted to G.I. Joe Extreme. I don't know if there's a book out there, but if there's a book out there about how Kenner and Hasbro's merger worked, or really Hasbro's acquisition of Kenner, I would read it and then talk about it on a future podcast.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you talk about it, because I wouldn't read it probably. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you don't know how to read, so there'd be a problem.
Let me see what else. Okay. Oh, wait a second. Freight. We got to move to Freight.
Right.
Freight. Yeah, cutting edge demolitions expert / ex all pro linebacker.
Interesting.
And
so
I'll-
it's
and-
Roadblock and the Fridge. And, don't forget, he was big time real American hero guy.
Right. If you have the expanse of the G.I. Joe line and you're like, okay, we got to cut this down to 7 people.
Right.
All right, well, let's just combine everybody into one thing. Here you go, Freight. Enormously huge, incredibly bulked, over-the-top aggressive, throws his weight around with power-packed football-style hits and headbutts. That could be like some Lawrence Taylor shit right there.
Yeah, but Lawrence Taylor wasn't a G.I. Joe.
That is correct.
Refrigerator Perry was.
Right,
So,
right.
So's Roddy Piper. Watch out.
Roddy Piper was a G.I. Joe?
All right, they released the Roddy Piper Real American Hero figure in like 2006.
Oh,
That's like a convention exclusive. It's expensive now. I'd like to buy it.
Yeah.
It's like $800 or something now. But basically, he's an Iron Grenadier. He's related to Destro's Scottish clan, and he's like Destro's sergeant. Like he trains guys how to hand-to-hand fight. It's a really, really great way to work him into the continuity.
That is fucking great.
And it was nice because then they had a guy to offset Sergeant Slaughter. So in your headcanon, when like they're fighting, like, here comes Roddy Piper and Sergeant Slaughter, like right for each other. You know what I mean?
Right. You know,
all I hear you saying is that They Live is canon in the G.I. Joe verse, which is something I've always believed, and now you're confirming it. So
I am confirming it. Listen, any continuity where there is a CEO who like got fired for dumping a bunch of toxic waste straight up into the ocean and got disfigured, but then hired by a terrorist organization to continue to dump toxic waste into the ocean cesspool, obviously They Live is happening in that continuity.
Yeah. Oh man,
those aren't aliens; those are descendants from Globulus.
Talk about hot takes.
Nice.
Okay, and hey, I've got 2 more left here on the GI Joe team, and these ones you won't.
Anyone left?
You won't find figures of Short Fuse or Tall Sally. I'll tell you that much.
Bless their heart.
Yeah, okay. Short Fuse comes in here. I really don't know if I don't have anything.
Another code name that was used in Real American Hero.
Yeah, it really is.
And then Tall Sally, who these two, they're there. But as far as like what they do on the team, I don't know if that's really showcased other than just be there.
Listen, what they do is they fulfill the role of a World War II guy.
Okay. Because
you learn that, like, man, he sure loves his kid. Boy, she sure loves her family.
Yep.
I can't imagine anything about it. It's just like when they're getting on the boat to D-Day. He's like, I can't wait to get home and kiss my sweetheart and have a piece of my mom's apple pie. Like, well, buddy, it's a World War II movie.
Tall Sally is involved with Metalhead in this first issue. So there's a relationship that's going on there. But yeah, you're right. They set up these heartstrings that are clearly going to be getting tugged here pretty soon. Actually, I didn't see it coming. I wouldn't expect it.
They're just going to be getting cut. They're not getting tugged. Like.
Yeah, right. And our last little bit here is, what is SCAR? All right, did you know that SCAR actually stood for something? Well, they have.
Soldiers of Chaos, Anarchy, and Ruin?
And spell fucking chaos, KHAOS.
I also take offense to them being like, we're in favor of anarchy. That is not anarchy, the philosophy. As we discussed on our anarchy podcast. And from an anarchist, you're giving this a bad name. Stop.
Now, yes.
Also, that sounds a lot like Score. It looks a lot like Score, that candy bar.
Score bar.
That
my wife's
bar.
favorite.
My grandma loved those. They're gross.
Oh, we eat them all the time down here. If we can find them, you can't find them.
I was going to say
that's the thing.
They still even make
They're
them?
still around, but
right,
you can't. You got.
Yeah, I bet you got to go to the Dollar Tree to find them. I'm not making that up. Like, you go to the Dollar Tree and there'll be like flavors and shit that they just don't have other. I got some like apple gum or something that I hadn't seen in years. And the last time I was at the Dollar Tree.
That's crazy.
So,
all right, let's start with Iron Claw.
How about
mastermind.
That tip? Nobody expected that tip. Go to the Dollar Tree. They got candy.
The mastermind and leader of the SCAR forces, completely power hungry and bad to the bone.
Power hungry as Score bars.
He may be. Poses as Count Von Ronnie. while secretly plotting military operations and evil invasions in his ultimate plan to rule the world. Let's just combine more figures. Let's combine more characters. So there you go. That is Iron Claw. But yes, you're right. Coolest looking guy out of this whole franchise. Go ahead.
I think his look, and like I think Darry showed us where Scioli and the G.I. Joe vs. Transformers, like the only shout out to this is like him and like Sergeant Savage like going at each other, which are probably the two characters that deserve the shout out if you're gonna give it one.
Now Iron Claw answers to somebody at the beginning of these issues, the Duchess of Maclavia. He is seen, at least for the first couple issues, chatting with her and trying to, expressing that he's wanting to do her bidding. So the Duchess of Maclavia.
I saw this Duchess lady, like, she's like, yeah, I'm in charge of SCAR, the Soldiers of Chaos, Anarchy, and Ruin. Yeah, why'd you do that? Because I want Europe to be ruled by monarchical bloodlines again. That doesn't sound like chaos, anarchy, or ruin. Like this doesn't sound like any of those things. You know what I mean? Like, we can argue whether that's good or bad, but like she's not like, oh man, I can't wait until we have bloodline kings again, and then everything will be ruined, everything will be chaotic. What the fuck is that? Why would you name your thing that?
Maybe Iron Claw saw through that and was like, all right, we got to get rid of her.
Saw through lots of her bullshit. Remember the part where she's like, you're my best soldier because you killed everyone in front of you. And he's like, that's right, I did. And then she gets mad at him like 10 minutes later for like hitting somebody.
Yeah,
like,
right,
why would you hit them? I don't know. The same reason you thought it was cool when I killed everybody. You seem to be into it.
Oh, Inferno. Surprise. He has panache for explosives and fire.
Good for him.
He does. Yes, he does.
Did I misunderstand this, or is the entire backup story in the miniseries his like messed up origin story?
Yep.
Whose messed up origin story?
Inferno's the guy going around bombing the
facilities. He like blows up military bases.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were talking about
count than any
Cobra
member.
No, not. I mean, he's obviously part of that story, but no, he's not Inferno. Inferno's the one going around bombing things, and then I assume it's Iron Claw showing up at the end saying, you seem like you're right for my organization. I know Battle.
Would you like to join the Soldiers of Chaos, Anarchy, and Ruin? We have a 401k.
A good dental plan.
I don't know if you know about this, but a .com boom is coming. We're going to be on top of that.
Scar definitely feels like they're overreacting. Like Iron Claw is clearly Dr. Doom, and he runs a small country that you couldn't find on a map. He clearly just wants that country. Scar sounds like the type of thing that a bunch of very concerned mothers would make up they'd be afraid of. Like, what is everything they're terrified of? Well, it's part of the acronym of SCAR. They don't know what any of the individual words mean. Like, clearly Count Von Ronnie or whatever is going on there, like, he just wants to control his little country. He wants to get in the EU. He wants wealthy trade routes. He wants all the other stuff. How's he going to do that? Well, he's going to terrify the rest of you into thinking the greatest terrorist organization for the mid-90s is located here, so you'll do something about it. Like, again, the whole thing's got a very Hans Gruber feel to it, where it's just like, I'm not buying the politics of this. The Snake Man, who may have also been a used car salesman, him I bought this. This you're not selling me, Mr. Claw.
Rampage. Jekyll and Hyde thing going on with this guy.
When I was reading it and like he does the green face thing, and I remember being like, what the fuck is the Green Goblin truck from Maximum Overdrive doing here?
Yes, I had the same
not
thought.
The Green Goblin truck
from Maximum Overdrive. Yes, I had the same thought.
As soon as you like said his name, I just busted out laughing. I just thought about that again. I was like, why is the truck from Maximum Overdrive here?
Do I have the?
There should be a Maximum Overdrive comic book. We should write it.
Oh, I love that.
There should
be Transformers Maximum Overdrive crossover. That's a good one.
I'm bringing this up right now because I know I'll forget later. But Rampage shows up in this first story, and I mean, he's like, roar! He turned into this big old thing, and then Iron Claw like fucking bitch slaps him, and he's like, "You work for me now." He's like, "Oh, okay," and he just goes off. I'm like, Rampage, really? Okay, all right.
That's how they do things in corporate America. If a bigger, more masculine person just slaps you down when you're having a good day, you work for them now. That's it. Tie pins and everything.
It reminded me of the episode of Masters of the Universe where like Skeletor summons Cthulhu, and like Like, for real, like, he can't control it. And then He-Man's like, we'll have to work together on this, Skeletor. And he's like, never, He-Man. and then He-Man goes, oh, yes, you will. And then Skeletor's just like, as you wish.
Those two get together in the end, because I've never seen an episode of Masters of the Universe, but I just assume it's a gay love story.
It isn't, unless you want it.
You can't have it.
You can have that.
You can't.
Here's the thing. Prince Adam gets with Skeletor, but He-Man doesn't.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. That's the way it was always going to happen. You know,
Right,
Lois
right.
loves Superman, not Clark. Yeah, of course.
Then we have Wreckage. He's this like oversized cyborg dude. Got a Wolverine haircut, the patch, the boot at some point. Apparently he had been experimented on in the past. Now I got this from a little bit of the cartoon, but he was experimented on in the past, then obviously hates the government because they're the ones that did the experiments on him, aligns himself with Scar. That's fair. Yeah, I agree. And then we have the Skyrenes, folks. Robots in the service of Scar. They show up quite a few times. They get their asses handed to them quite a few times.
Stuff like this always reminds me of shit like the Cobra Helicarrier, the Trouble Bubbles, 14 fucking hydrofoils or whatever. It's got, a million bats. And now you've got like these Skyrenes. Just go be rich. Just go be rich. What is it you're trying to take over? What is it you could have that you don't have now? Like, if you're in charge of the world, all you're going to wind up doing is having to, like, appoint an administrator of education. It seems like right now you have a lot of, like, money and time, and you're very inventive. So you can just hang out. Like, what is it you want that you don't have?
That's the best line we have ever had on this show is, if you conquer the world, the only change is going to be you have to appoint a minister of education. We've peaked. We've peaked. Everyone at home can stop listening right now. We've peaked. You're right. You're 100% right, by the way. I agree with you completely. I'm just saying we've peaked.
We've jumped the shark that came with the second eel that fired the torpedo.
Just bam, just right there.
Right.
The hour of the Iron Claw, pawn of the Iron Claw, the gang's all here, and the ultimate price. All right, here we go. Our first story focuses on G.I. Joe, a military group made up of experts in their fields. We just gave you the rundown, folks. All with the singular purpose to protect humanity from terrorist threats, mainly the one posed by Iron Claw and his group called Scar. After Professor Rayland perfected a world-changing formula for something called Fertigel, Iron Claw looks to use it as a weapon in order to dominate the planet. However, when G.I. Joe is called in to intervene, they lock horns with Scar, even losing some of their ranks. Rest in peace, Short Fuse and Tall Sally. But are finally able to stop the evil Iron Claw and force him back into hiding. I told you, that synopsis is light, folks. That is
there's not a lot of meat on the bone, I mean, no. It's like the leg that you get from KFC 5 minutes before they close. It's not a lot there. I mean, that's what you got.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's upsetting because I find that Tall Sally and Short Fuse are the most interesting people in this because, like, they did things other than, like, Mayday being like, don't talk to me like that, boys. I'm as tough as you. And, like, guys trying to hit on her and just a whole bunch of it. Like I said, it's insipid dialogue. But they were like, I was like, oh, I'm somewhat interested. You're going to die. And sure enough, they did, I mean, yeah, you can, there's just not much more there. Let me ask y'all a question. Dark Horse, as you said, was known for a lot of licensed material. G.I. Joe, the G.I. Joe license had been at Marvel, and Larry Hama had done, a fairly serious job with it. Isn't it weird that, like, at Dark Horse, which is known for doing a lot more serious license stuff and a much more serious take, even making something like Indiana Jones slightly more serious, that they went with this straight up, this is supposed to sell toys and be for 9-year-olds comic book? Because where would they even buy? Like, this wouldn't have even been on the newsstands at this time. Right. They were being phased out. Does that strike you as odd, Jesse?
Yeah, man. I have no idea why they would do something like this, to be honest.
It seems off-brand.
Right.
Even within their brand.
Exactly. Yeah, man, I don't know. Is there somebody that knows somebody that said, hey, we need to get G.I. Joe Extreme on the shelves, and here's why, just to kick it in with the with the figures? Go ahead.
I assume it's because that's what they did before. I mean, shit, all the way until, like, maybe even now to an extent, but much lesser. But until, like, 2005, the idea was you'd put out a toy line, you'd get some kind of licensed comic book, you'd have a cartoon. You think about Skeleton Warriors around this same time, the 2000X He-Man, it seems like even like Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes kind of worked that way. I think that was just the idea. It had worked gangbusters for them before. Marvel Comics had as much to do with making G.I. Joe a household name and the phenomenon that it was in the 80s as anything Hasbro did, because Marvel's existence allowed them to circumvent advertising laws so that they could like put as much animation as they wanted in a commercial for a comic book. You can only put so much animation in a comic book, in a commercial that's for a toy, because the idea is you'll fool a kid into thinking a toy can do shit it can't. But if it's for a comic book, you do whatever the fuck you want. There's no law about that. And a law about that would be thornier because that's a First Amendment right. That's a freedom of the press thing. The Constitution doesn't guarantee you a whole lot of powers in regard, or rights in regard to like toys. It guarantees speech, but it gives Congress the right to regulate commerce. We're getting thorny, but freedom of like the press is like much more hardcore. It'd be harder to even make that law, so they couldn't. I just think that's what it worked. That's what worked for Transformers, He-Man, Thundercats, G.I. Joe, Silverhawks, Cops and Crooks to a lesser extent. They're just trying to do the same thing. That's what I would assume. Maybe one day we'll be able to track down the editor and see how this came about, because it also doesn't seem like a license to be clamored for it this time.
Right.
But that's my guess. My guess is this got done because that's what had worked before.
Right. Darry, you got anything to add to that?
There's an Extreme Ghostbusters comic. There's Transformers Generation 2. Beast Wars has a comic book around the same time. So they were still doing the same stuff. Sorry, Darry, go ahead.
No, you're the expert here. I do think this is weird because you're right. Dark Horse, really good with the licensed properties, especially around this time. I mean, they're riding high with the Star Wars stuff. Like they are carving
Aliens, Predator, Terminator, RoboCop, Indiana Jones. I mean, some stuff I can't even think of. And their shit's taken off. The Mask is taken off. Time Cop's a better movie than it had any right to be.
It's weird because you get this, and it's really just an adaptation of the show. It doesn't add anything. It doesn't go to crazy places. But I also wonder how much of that is Mike Barr, because, we talked about this offline, but it's like he doesn't even use the right name for the characters. Like, how much of this is just I need to turn in a script, and this is it. This is the Orson Welles famously said of his role in Transformers the movie, well, I got paid to play the larger toy that ate all the little toys.
I scream a lot, then I tear myself apart on screen and I die. It seems impossible, but I guess it is possible, but I don't think it's a paid book because they charge people for it. Normally, like a paid comic is a giveaway. You know what I mean? So but that doesn't mean that like there wasn't a little quid pro quo, but because it seems odd that Dark Horse would be clamoring for it.
So our four covers. Well, before we get into that, Darry had to leave, ladies and gentlemen. He will obviously return next episode, but
I believe Scar caught him.
Right. He is currently in training to be a soldier of chaos and anarchy.
And ruin. He's going to be more on the chaos part.
We can talk about the covers if you want. We got some beautiful Frank Miller cover, which, by the way, made the list. I'll give a shout out to my boys over at Kapow, the Pop Culture Podcast, because I was on a podcast with them where we did a countdown of our top comic book covers. And Jordan Lowe picked this as, it was in there. It wasn't his top one, but that Frank Miller cover to issue 1, pretty iconic in his eyes. He loved it. He had a poster of it. Dean, what do you think of that Frank Miller cover?
I think the best thing about any of this stuff is the covers, to be honest with you. I think that's the one thing I would recommend is you got this great Frank Miller cover. We get a great Simonson cover. There's 2 really good Norm Brayfogle covers. Yeah, I really like the cover. They really made me excited for things I was not going to get.
Right. That's one of them things where it's just like you see the cover, it makes you want to buy it. Boy, they really, really...
I think there's a lot of Frank Miller fans who bought that cover because, like you said, it's become iconic. It looks like G.I. Joe. It looks like America. And so, you're like, oh, I'll grab this. And grab the next one, I bet.
As my notes go down through here for this first story, as soon as Short Fuse talked to his pregnant wife, he was dead. I knew that was happening.
Oh, yeah! And then she's like the tall Sally's like, my mom sends letters that smell like her perfume. You're like, I agree.
Dead.
But let me ask you a question about that. So at the end, when like they get killed, why? Right. I don't understand what's happening. Like, so they have a bomb and there's a bomb on the thing and Iron Claw hits a button, but like it looks like the bomb blew up and drowns them, but it was their bomb. I don't know what's going on.
I don't either. I'm not.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad I wasn't the only one who was fucking confused. I was like, why did they die? Did they set the bomb wrong? What happened?
I was wondering what killed them too. I assume they
It
drowned.
looked like they drowned in the Fertigel glue.
Fertigel, yeah.
Also, I'll get back to that in a second, but like, yeah, it's just a confusing sequence of events.
Right. Mayday is rough around the edges, but she gets a smile on her face, it seems like, whenever she is getting disciplined by a superior. I don't know if you noticed that or not, but when I think it's Stone, like, just lays into her, but she is smiling the whole time.
All she ever does is like smile when she's being disciplined and tell the boys to leave her alone.
Right. Don't mess with her. Oh, not on my watch. Nope, not on my watch. I think that's the way we end this. That's the way we end this book. That's all my notes for this first issue. You know, this is the coolest.
First issue,
like,
that was the whole mini, right?
I mean, that was the whole thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Don't think I'm going to go through issue 2. Let's talk about it.
Right.
Not happening. Not happening. No, that's all I have here for these this first story. So, any other thoughts there? Fertigel, Dean, you sound like you were going to jump on that one.
So, do you remember when like Iron Claw or whatever kills the Duchess? And the guys are like, "What'd you do?" He's like, "It was one drop of this Fertigel, loud, deadly." But like, who cares? Like, if I put like a drop of like antifreeze in somebody's like thing, or like any kind of fertilizer, there's all kinds of chemicals. Like, if you drink them, you die. What's your point here? Also, like this whole Fertigel thing, they're like, we got to keep this safe. We got to, like, what's he trying to do? Like, if he gets it, what's his plan? To grow all the food in the world? There's a whole lot of this that doesn't make a lot of sense.
I have no idea. Best thing to come out of this, I'm going to echo it one more time. We've talked about it already. Iron Claw looks cool as shit. Just think Cobra Commander, but look, he's got a mask that's a skull. He's got skull fucking shoulder pads,
right.
And he's got a cape. He looks
like M. Bison, Day of the Dead.
Oh, wonderful. All right, let's talk about this second story here, From the Ashes.
I guess.
Here we get a glimpse of the past of a young man in 1976 who dreamt of being a hero like in the stories his father told him of G.I. Joe. Fast forward to 1998, and a series of bombings are targeting military sites and those investigating the bombings as well. When a bomb nearly kills an investigator by the name of Mr. C, he approaches the president, who offers him to be the head of Project GI, bringing the best and brightest together. Sometime after, the young man from the beginning has now grown and has joined Project GI, but the facility is bombed, nearly killing him. Badly injured, but able to escape with a doctor who is helping on the project, the man finds refuge in an isolated cabin and decides that he is no longer going to use his given name. Trust me, he will let you know. Don't call him by his name.
Yeah, I no longer have a name. It's like the song Secret Agent Man. You know, they gave him a number. They took away his name.
He will be now known as G.I. Joe, and his next move will be to find and end this bomber's rampage. Putting things together, G.I. Joe surmises the next target is the president at the funeral for the soldiers of Project GI. Getting things together, he is able to make the save and capture the bomber, who turns out to be Inferno. Mr. C, which I'm assuming is Clancy, by the way. Is that his name? Was that his name, Clancy? Mr. Clancy,
yeah.
Right? Mr. Clancy. Mr. C recognizes G.I. Joe as being just the right man for them to use as a solo operative and convinces him to join them in their endeavors. So there you go. That is From the Ashes. This is the second story that took place throughout the 4 issues of this first volume. Boy, this guy does not want to be called anything other than G.I. Joe. So he gets that across quite a few times in this story. In this one, for some reason, I had a hard time keeping people straight. Like, that's really tough to try and enjoy a story. I know you've already, this thing's got 2 strikes against it. If you were trying to read it and keep it straight and it's difficult, boy, is that frustrating for the reader.
Yeah. And also, I find that the backup story is confusingly laid out. I think it's like a second-rate Unknown Soldier story. That's how it comes across to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love the Unknown Soldier, too, so.
The only other thing I had here is G.I. Joe put that plan together pretty quickly. Like, he's at the funeral and he's like sitting there thinking, like, where could the bomb be? What could be happening? And then he's immediately like, it's got to be in a coffin. Like, don't check the coffin. Don't actually, but it's not like he is absolutely certain, because it's within seconds that he is jumping on the president and diving on him before it detonates to the final tone of taps. Like, he's even got that figured out. Like, he knew, like, oh yeah, it'll be right on the final tone of taps. Like,
how terrible is the security apparatus here? They're like, listen, Don't check the coffins. No way. No way there's a bomb in there. Don't check anything. Listen, this is a funeral. You have some respect.
No kidding. This is a funeral.
What is happening? Like, especially it's a funeral for a bunch of people who are just killed in the terrorist attack. Like, you remember 9/11, like, you couldn't, like, you know, if you went outside, somebody security checked you the second you were out there.
Right.
Like, what is...
Right. Well, there is our first volume. We're going to get into the second volume of this thing. And this was a strange one to break up, because what's going to end up happening here is when we reach the end of our final issue in this second volume, there was more planned. A hiatus just happened.
And it's called a cancellation, Jesse. They canceled it because nobody fucking bought it, because why the fuck would they? For all the fucking reasons we've already fucking said.
All right, let's talk about Red Scream. Part 1 is Hunted. Part 2 is Shake Hands with Satan. And Part 3 is Island Assault. All written by Mike Barr. Art by Tatsuya Ishida. Ink by Scott Reed on the first part. Colored by David Nestel on the second part. It looks like the third part as well. So, all right, let's get into this.
Let's do it.
All right, Red Scream. It has been some time since the end of our first volume, and G.I. Joe is still protecting the land. However, when the Joes are framed for the killing of some Inter-Alliance refugees, they are soon arrested. Escaping prison and now on the run, the team looks to clear their name and also discovers this was not the work of Iron Claw. A new threat by the name of Red Scream has attacked both G.I. Joe and Scar, forcing the two teams into a truce in order to work together. But how long can these two enemies cooperate? Yeah, buddy. I wrote the back of the book. If you got the trade of this.
I wrote the blurb.
I wrote the blurb. I have numerous notes on this thing. Like, because there's a lot of absurdity that happens in this. And I say absurdity. You're looking at this. This is extreme, you know. When you open it up.
It's absurd.
Iron Claw, by the way, is training. And he's not training against people. He's training against a fucking tiger. Now, that's got to upset you, Dean. That's got to upset you, right?
No, I mean, I don't like that he's hitting a kitty. I like cats, but, like, that's a tiger, and I almost, like, I'm a big Tekken fan, and in Tekken, like, there's a bear and a panda bear, and, like, you go to, like, Killer Instinct, where there's the wolf guy, within the fighting realm, I've accepted that giant cats and giant things fight, so, I mean, okay. I think that he was rough with the tiger, but I was not upset because it's, I understand. You don't go and train against animals like that. Iron Claw, damn it, man. Oh, well, I mean, you shouldn't, but like that, I think they're both training, like the way Hayachi trained Kuma to learn.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
That's my headcanon, but you're probably right. He's probably just beating up a tiger because he's a bad guy. He probably stole this tiger from Siegfried and Roy, and is fucking killing it.
We finally get some cool names for vehicles in this. I don't recall vehicles happening in the first volume. This second volume, though, there are definitely some shout-outs to some crazy vehicles that the Joes and Scar have. The
toys here.
Bone Splitter Armor Assault, the Sonic Laser Cannon Tank, which, by the way, what a weird idea for a vehicle. But in my mind, I'm seeing this thing, the Sonic Laser Cannon Tank, like there's like a microphone and you say something into it, and then it echoes really loud on as you're playing with it. I mean, that's a pretty cool concept. And in the book,
the Snake Mountain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh man, those were the days. I had a Snake Mountain.
Me too. One of the only play sets I ever got, and it got some use. You want to talk about G.I. Joe attacked Snake Mountain a few times.
I was going to say, I don't have a problem with G.I. Joe's crossing over and doing anything on other play sets. But man, form factor was a big deal for me.
You can't be wrong about this kind of thing.
Good to see Metalhead's doing fine after the death of Sally. He seems to be right back up and
moving right along. Listen, you saw the end of the miniseries. He just wanted to get back to work. He has a calling. he has a purpose, like the guy from the Carnage concert with the knife, because like he was ready to go. He was waiting for a metal icon to tell him, let's kill some people, grab the guy by the hair, ready to kill him. So Metalhead had a purpose. I feel like Metalhead may have been at that concert. He may have been the guy that the Carnage guy grabbed, and like that's when he decided to become G.I. Joe Extreme. He wasn't extreme enough to live in those times.
I'm fucking messaging Darry right now. Shit. All right. Eagle Eye. This was an interesting little tidbit that I pulled out of this. I was right at the beginning when the Joes get thrown in jail. He's like, I think it's Harpoon. He's like, I don't want to be sleeping with Eagle Eye. He snores. And I'm like, who's fuck
Eagle
is he?
Eye?
Yeah, who is Eagle Eye? And then what we end up finding out, if you do a little bit of research, is that Ballistic was going to be known as, or is actually known as, Eagle Eye in the second season of the TV series. Either way, the next page has a poster of all the Joes that are like on the run and wanted. Ballistic is up there, so it doesn't say Eagle Eye under his picture.
It's not uncommon if you go back and look at early G.I. Joe and Transformers comics from Marvel, or even like other licensed stuff, the Masters of the Universe, Thundercats, they'll get names wrong, colors will be wrong, like that kind of thing. It's just the nature of this beast, because the animation, all that stuff can change. Well, not the animation itself, but like the stories and that kind of thing can change more quickly on the making a show in than it can for like a comic book. Like you got to have a comic book ready to go, I think 3 months before, like it's all got to be done. It can't be changed from that point.
Right.
You can bring a voice actor in like a week before something's going to air and redo it and, change some stuff without changing the animation, Right. From what I understand, I could be wrong.
My next note is Red Scream dresses like a ninja, but is the least stealthy ninja ever, with her stupid scream that she enters every single room. Like, you can hear her coming at least a full 5 seconds before she shows up. So don't dress like a ninja, Red Scream.
Well,
that's
she likes to make an appearance.
Sure.
This may be a nudge to the Red Shadows, who were the bad guys in Action Force, led by Major Ironblood. And like later, Cobra Commander would take over in that continuity. But in other G.I. Joe stuff, including the Devil's Due stuff, they would be their own thing. And like since then, they've kind of been treated like they were their own entity. So I thought that maybe Red Scream was a shout out to the Red Shadows and the Action Force stuff. I can't say for sure. I hope so, because that makes it cooler to me.
Yeah,
I do like Red Scream. I think she has a good look. I think the best thing about these 4 issues is the cover of issue number 2, where she's, firing the flintlock lasers. The weirdest thing to me, honestly, about this whole thing is like they have these clones who go do this bad stuff. And then they go to arrest the real Joes. The real Joes were somewhere else. And they're like, it wasn't us. Like, too bad you're under arrest.
I know.
These are like major security installations. Why don't you like check the security
check the fucking footage.
Like, there's got to be like 633,000 different ways to track people coming in and out of this base. I'd look at one of them.
Right.
I don't know. But of course, it turns out that like the lady arresting them is the Red Scream. So she has no interest in any of like actual information. Also, did you see that thing with the Inner Alliance people, like the council who voted, and the one who was like, it wasn't unanimous.
Oh, right. And it was Iron Claw. It was Count Danarani.
Shadow. It's like, it wasn't unanimous. Wow.
Right. So he's got like this weird kind of, I don't know. Am I going to chalk that up to honor, I guess? He's got this code of honor.
Red Scream was trying to put him out too, so I think that he wanted to work with them. But you want to know what the further story is of him being on this council and also running Scar. That's something that's almost interesting that happens in these comic books, which is kind of the highest praise you're going to get. I'm Sergeant Savage on these things.
The G.I. Joe appears in this book. So the man at the end of our story from the ashes actually shows up here. So the G.I. Joe, and he helps out the Joes.
We were all holding our breath.
Yeah, I was like, wait, is he going to show up? The G.I. Joe does not have a figure, and I don't know if he showed up in the cartoon or not. So I don't know if that's just fully whole cloth for this comic. We get a good old-fashioned mirror match. You mentioned the clones, which was pretty cool. We get G.I. Joe versus the clones of themselves. They're evil doppelgangers, if you will, which is, it's all right when they're like, switch up.
A little early for a G.I. Joe got framed story. like you don't really care enough about, like, I don't know enough about this reality or anything yet.
Right.
Or even the characters yet. I don't know. It seemed a little early for that. I do like clones fighting, but isn't it weird how, like, no clone is able to do anything but fight their clone?
Right.
But, like, if you switch, somehow they can't. Like, if they're a clone, wouldn't they be able to also, like, change it up?
They're going to have
but they
advantages.
can't. That's not what they do.
That's right.
If we had clones here, you would have to beat mine, and I would have to beat yours.
That's right.
Those are the rules. Right. I didn't make them.
Red
Stream did.
Yes, you did. Wreckage. When this is all going down, we got this. This alliance between Iron Claw and Scar and the GI Joes. Wreckage actually comes across as somebody that stays kind of allied with the Joes. Or at least he's helping them out. There's a point where Iron Claw's like, you know what? Let G.I. Joe deal with their doppelgangers. Let's go ahead and go take care of our own business. And Wreckage is like, no, you know what? I'm gonna help these guys out a little bit.
What about our?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Wreckage, I guess, is a tweener.
He is. Yeah, he feels like he definitely is.
And they've established that you can, switch sides here, because Quick Strike did. So, I guess that would have been something we would have seen going forward. Would he have switched all the way or not?
Right. And I mentioned G.I. Joe actually showing up. He is one of the ones that help him save the day when he sabotages the Sonic tank. That's pretty
funny. It was really funny. He's like, there were too many hostiles to leave this tank operational. Like that's really, really funny.
Smart.
R.I.P. Red Scream, but I bet she would have come back.
I have a feeling too.
Well, I think Red Scream was the most interesting thing about it, honestly. Like I said, almost interested in that, and they had the great cover, and that's where we're at. That's where we're at.
Issue 4. All right.
Yeah.
Issue 4. All this in World War II, written by Mike Barr, penciled by Joel Naperstek, inked by Joel Naperstek and Carlos Garzon. The Last Wild Heart, Part 1, The Fourth Man.
Part 1 of Never.
Part 1, The Fourth Man. Written by Nathaniel Lakenmeyer, art by Frank Turan, colored by David Nestel, lettered by Tracy Hampton Muncie. I think she was in most of these too. But anyway, here we go. All right. So our first story. As the team embarks on some missions in the brand new VRT, virtual reality trainer, just in case you didn't know, things begin to get serious when a power surge hits and traps the team inside the program, fighting Nazis in a virtual World War II scenario. Luckily, the program is cut off if the mission is completed by getting a professor to safety, and they are able to do so and finally escape the simulation. So there you go. Good. That is our first story. They get trapped in the VR. They can't get out. Oh my gosh, what do we got to do? I don't know. Just finish the level.
It sounds like some bullshit I would have told my parents so I could keep playing a video game. I can't shut it off. I got to finish this level first or else, oh man, it's the only way to work. Also, has there ever been a virtual reality program that anyone in a comic book has ever entered where it was like, oh shit, now it's real, you could die?
Right.
And it always happens.
It always
and it's always an electro glitch or some shit.
Yeah. So my notes for this are VR in the 90s, which
that's
so much hope for VR and what virtual reality would be, which it is not like that in the 90s. And even in 2009, I don't know if we're getting our PlayStation 4 virtual reality headset at that point or not. But either way, you still got to deal with cords, and at least they kind of saw that in this thing.
Right.
My next note was exactly what you said in all caps. You'll die in real life.
Happens
all the time.
What can you do? That's why I will never put on an Oculus. If I'm going to die, I'm only going to do it one time in the real motherfucking world.
Don't chance it.
Yeah.
There's fucking quicksand and fucking virtual reality.
Right.
Okay?
Done.
You're going to die.
Ain't this real time? Ain't this enough for you?
Right. My third note was just a real small note. They have successfully crashed 2 planes, and none of them have hurt themselves at all. Crashed 2 of them.
In the other one, like in the first 3 issues, when Mayday's flying the plane and the other planes take off after her, she's like, "I'll show him something." She like lands. She flies low. Like I'm like these other planes. Like I don't know. She's getting real close to the ground. I don't know what to do.
Oh man, back off. We're done. Surrender. Throw the white flag.
Right. But yeah, they do crash planes. They're really into it. Yeah, I also like how Sergeant Savage almost died.
Yes.
But then they're like, oh, we got him out. We rescued the prisoner just before you got blown away. So nothing counts after that. Wow, what a save. Yeah, I like Sergeant Savage for some reason. I think it's just a cool name. But outside of that, it's this is just a very typical virtual reality 1990s story. It's not. Yes, it's probably the best issue of all of them. And it's incredibly meh.
Yeah, it's mundane.
And our second means not pain. We're going to talk about it now.
G.I. Joe Mundane.
We have
the second story here, the last Wild Heart Part 1, the fourth man, and none of that makes sense. Okay, wait a second. No, the fourth man is the man holding the camera. That's right, because they kind of mentioned that in the story. I wondered why that was brought up here in the title. All right, so anyway, here's our story.
More thought than I did. I was like, well, that's dumb, and kind of went on.
It's only like 4 pages. Anyway, in our second story, Mr. Clancy and the G.I. Joe are reviewing some found footage of a documentary crew that went deep into a jungle. I think this is like in 1961. When the crew is attacked and seemingly killed, the camera is picked up by a crazed, grinning figure that Joe recognizes as Dr. Christie. My goodness, is this nothing but the setup for something that never happens? I mean, it's just like nothing ever happens with this. So,
and that's the world's probably a better place for that.
Right. I have one note, and I've already told you what this note is, and that is what or who Dr. Christie could be, because there is headcanon now where I am putting Dr. Christie and Dr. Morbus from the Cheetah Men comic together. They are one and the same.
Right.
And yes, Dr. Christie has been experimenting on animals since 1960-something, and the Cheetah Men were something that was going to happen in the second part of this G.I. Joe Extreme mini. That's my guess. This was an old
that's where Chester Cheetah from Cheetos comes from.
How the hell did you know?
that I believe that's the experiments led to that. It ain't easy being cheesy.
I need you to find yourself a couple things. Number one, do you have a Chester Cheetah like pop figure?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Oh, fucking course you do. All right. And then we've got to figure out if we can find you got to have a G.I. Joe Extreme figure. So you're going to have to get on the horn with somebody. And then I want somehow you've got to find something, one of those mock-ups from the back of the Cheetah Men comic where they were like, toy line's coming. You got to find Dr. Morbus. And then you need to send me a picture or post it on Facebook, all three of them sitting at your desk at work, along with the Punisher and Thanos. No, make it a wrestling figure. Take Thanos out of it.
Earthquake and typhoon, the natural disaster.
Perfect. All right.
I'll see what I can do. That's a tall order.
Tall order. Well.
Tall order, tall Sally.
Tall Sally. Long drink of water, baby.
Long, tall Sally. The old Little Richard song. Sliced along, making a character killer in the end.
The letters page in the issue 4 said the ongoing series stated that the book was going on a hiatus, but Dark Horse lost the license before further issues were ever released.
Yeah, lost in quotes.
How do you lose something when you put it in the trash? I don't understand. Dean, we did it, man. We did G.I. Joe Extreme. We got all 2 volumes done. I really hope somebody out there is like, gosh, I need to find somebody that is talking about the 2 volumes of G.I. You're not going to find those. You're not going to find this in any other podcast. No comic book podcast. It's hard to try and find this niche content right here. Yeah. It's right here. We're doing you.
Well, other people are smarter than we are, and they don't torture themselves like this.
It's only been 2 hours. We dedicated 3 times this much to Unity, but damn it, G.I. Joe Extreme got done.
We did it. We did it. Self high five. My final thought is probably I feel bad for having talked so poorly about this, but I really prefer stuff where we talk about stuff we like.
I know.
I prefer stuff that where at least if it is bad, there's fun. This wasn't fun and it wasn't good, and we found the fun and we found some good stuff to talk about. But I feel bad. This was not a good time to be a G.I. Joe fan. Although if you go to like YouTube and you look at like the theme song, there are plenty of people who enjoy it. There are plenty of people who are like, oh, this is my first exposure to G.I. Joe, etc. And good for them. And I'm glad they got into G.I. Joe. For the people who like this, I'm glad you do. It's absolute goddamn poison for me. But I'm glad it's there. because, like I said, I know it's some people's first exposure to G.I. Joe, and I guess it kept the brand going until it could find its footing again as like a hipster niche type thing in the end of the century. So, but I wish I like it better when I talk about things I like. That's the thing.
Understand.
I don't want people to think that I sit around and be like, oh man, we find something shitty to talk about. There's plenty of people who do that for 90s comics. It's not usually what we do, but I'm a G.I. Joe guy, and we had to talk about this because it's part of it's an overlooked part of 90s history. It's an overlooked part of G.I. Joe history, and we did it.
We did it, man. It's G.I. Joe Day.
G.I. Joe Day.
There's probably better ways to celebrate. But I'll tell you what, we have shine a light on that darkened corner of the G.I. Joe universe. Right. And now you don't have to stay there anymore. You don't
pick up the toys for a quarter.
Yeah, there you go.
G.I. Joe Extreme Day.
All right, Dean, tell them about the Unspoken Decade.
The UnspokenDecade.com, a lot of 90s comics stuff going down there. A lot of great articles on all kinds of things. We're also over at Facebook, and the Twitter's been updated a little bit more often recently. So at Unspoken Decade on Twitter, and just search for us on Facebook, The Unspoken Decade. Really a lot of fun covers, a lot of fun stuff going on. Always down to have a chat or two about any 90s comic stuff that you want to talk about. From Hellboy to Codename Helix, I'm here for you.
All right. Right here on the Source Material Comics feed, you can listen to some previous episodes. I'll tell you right now, as we are talking 2 days ago, our first installment of our discussion about Pizza Hut comics hit the feed. We're talking about the Collector's Edition, X-Men Collector's Edition that came out, 4-issue set. And if you had some greasy fingers from some personal pan pizza and you grabbed yourself an issue, you may recall what was going on back in the 90s at Pizza Hut. That's right. Me, Dean, and Darry talked about that. We had a good time. A lot of love for Scott Lobdell. I mean, we gushed.
Not for me.
We gushed about the man, and a lot of love for Bishop. I mean, I could not get Dean to stop talking about it.
No, I do not like Bishop. He looked like a cavalry guy what went and killed the Native Americans in the 1800s. Looks like he got on that. That's what his gear looked like. I don't need that. Although I have heard from 3 people now about my Bishop
really
diatribe.
Have you really?
So
wow.
Matthew Price was gave me a good teasing about that. So you Bishop lovers out there, you keep doing what you do. I have nothing but respect for you. Cable's better.
All right.
But you agree, man. You can say whatever you want. You think Cable's better too.
Well, look, I know, right?
I
have more cable issues than I have more cable issues than I have XSE issues. So on the Source Material feed, you can also find the Source Material Comics podcast. Our last discussion was Mark and I got together and talked about a book by Dan Panosian called Slots. Came out in, I think, 2017, maybe 2019. Either way, it's about a down on his luck retired boxer who decides to turn his life around and head back to Vegas and maybe make some things right. So check that out. We're done here. Dean Compton is right there. Darry Waite taking care of his kid. We love you, buddy. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com and the Rattlich and Broadcasting Network, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.